The night this story begins, the wind dragged dust across the dying ranch, like a warning written in the air. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with someone who loves powerful, emotional stories, because what you're about to hear is not just a tale of poverty or marriage, but a story about judgment, survival, and a truth hidden behind a locked door. Ethan Cole had learned early that hunger had a sound. It was the low groan of an empty barn, the creak of fence posts leaning like tired men, and the slow, humiliating silence when neighbors stopped greeting him because they knew he had nothing left to offer. His ranch, once green and breathing, now looked like a skeleton picked clean by time. 3 acres of cracked earth, a collapsing shed, and one last thing of value, a single, thin cow that coughed when it walked. That cow was supposed to save him. When Ethan's father died, so did the illusion that hard work always paid off. Drought came like a curse. Banks came like vultures. The town watched from a distance, whispering that the Cole ranch was finished. Ethan sold tools, then land, then pride. By the time the matchmaker arrived, he was already broken enough to listen. Her name was Mrs. Halloway, and she smelled of old paper and secrets. She spoke softly as if offering a kindness, when she said there was a woman willing to marry him. No dowry, no demands, just one condition. She wants a cow, Mrs. Halloway said. Ethan laughed at first, a dry, hollow sound. Then he stopped laughing because she wasn't joking. 1 cow, she repeated. That's all. The woman, she said, was a stranger passing through the region. No family, no past anyone cared to ask about. People had seen her only once or twice, large, quiet, covered in plain clothes that hid her shape like armor. Some called her unfortunate, others were less kind. Ethan didn't ask what people said. He already knew what they would say about him. The wedding took place 3 days later. No flowers, no music, just the dry chapel at the edge of town where forgotten things went to be buried. The preacher spoke quickly, uncomfortable with the silence that followed every vow. Townspeople filled the benches, not out of love, but curiosity. They stared openly at the bride. She was heavy-set, wrapped in a dark dress too big even for her. Her face was round, pale, unreadable. Her hair was pulled back tightly, as if she feared it might betray her. She did not smile. She did not cry. She did not look at Ethan even once. Whispers crawled across the room. That's who he married? For a cow? Poor man must be desperate. Ethan stood stiff, shame burning hotter than the desert sun. He kept his eyes forward, jaw locked, repeating to himself that this was survival. Nothing more. He told himself that marriage was just another kind of labor. He told himself that people's laughter couldn't hurt worse than starvation. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the bride finally moved. She reached into her sleeve and placed a folded paper into Ethan's hand. Her fingers were warm, strong. Read this tonight, she said quietly. Her voice surprised him. It wasn't weak. It wasn't timid. It carried weight. The cow was delivered before sunset. That night, the ranch felt different. Not alive, just occupied, like something had entered and decided to stay. The bride walked the land slowly, touching fence posts, studying the soil, listening to the wind as if it spoke a language Ethan had forgotten. She said very little. Inside the house, a single oil lamp lit the walls where years of struggle were carved into peeling paint. Ethan poured water into chipped cups, his hands shaking with nerves he refused to name. This was his wife, a stranger, bought with a cow. The town's cruel joke. When the hour grew late, he cleared his throat. We should sleep, he said. She nodded once. They stood before the bedroom door like opponents waiting for a signal. Ethan reached for the handle. Stop. Her voice cut clean through him. She stepped forward, placed her palm flat against the door, and turned the lock from the inside. The sound echoed louder than it should have. You will sleep in the other room, she said. Ethan blinked. What? She turned to face him fully now. For the first time, he saw something behind her eyes. Not fear, not shame, command. This door stays locked at night, she said. That was part of the agreement. What agreement? He asked. The one you didn't know you were making. She handed him another folded paper. Read this. Carefully. Then she opened the door just enough to slip inside and shut it again. The lock clicked. Final. Absolute. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the wood between them. Anger rose first, hot, humiliating anger, then confusion. Then something colder. He unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was not a love letter. It was a contract, not written by a lawyer but by someone who understood power. It spoke of boundaries, of time, of silence, of conditions under which the door might one day open. It said nothing of affection, nothing of obedience. It ended with a single line that made his throat tighten. "Judge me by what I build here, not by what you see." Ethan slept on the floor that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind batter the walls. Behind the locked door, there was no sound at all. By morning, the ranch would never be the same, and neither would he. Morning came without kindness. The sun rose like an accusation, spilling light over the ranch and exposing every crack, every failure Ethan had tried to ignore for years. He woke on the hard floor with his back screaming and his pride bruised deeper than his bones. For a moment he forgot the wedding, the whispers, the locked door. Then he heard movement from the other side of the house, steady and deliberate, and memory returned like a blow. She was already awake. Ethan sat up, rubbing his face, listening. Pots clinked softly, water poured. Footsteps crossed the kitchen with purpose, not hesitation. It unsettled him. This was his house, yet the silence bent around her as if she owned it. When he entered the kitchen, she was standing at the small table, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back tighter than yesterday. A simple breakfast waited, bread warmed on the pan, a cup of tea steaming. She didn't look at him when he came in. "You can eat," she said. "Then go check the south fence." "It's failing." Ethan frowned. "How do you know that?" "I walked the land last night." "In the dark?" "Yes." He stared at her, searching for mockery. There was none. She ate slowly, methodically, like someone who had learned never to waste a bite. When she finished, she folded her hands. "My name is Margaret," she said. "You can call me that." Ethan nodded. "You locked me out." "Yes." "You married me." "Yes." "For a cow." Her eyes finally met his. They were sharp, measuring, older than her face suggested. "For a chance," she corrected. He wanted to argue, to demand explanations, but something in her expression warned him that shouting would make him smaller, not bigger. He turned and left for the fence instead. The south fence was worse than he remembered. Posts loose, wire rusted through. He swore under his breath. By noon his hands were bleeding, sweat soaking his shirt. When he returned, Margaret was outside, sleeves still rolled, digging with his shovel. "You don't have to," he began. "Yes, I do." She didn't stop. Her movements were strong, efficient. Dirt flew. Ethan watched, stunned, then silently took another tool and joined her. They worked without speaking for hours. When the sun leaned west, the fence stood straighter than it had in years. That night, she locked the door again. The town noticed changes before Ethan did. A week passed, then two. The cow grew healthier, fed properly, treated carefully. The land looked tended. Margaret rose before dawn and slept late into the night behind the locked door. She kept lists. She counted grain. She fixed what could be fixed and discarded what couldn't. People began stopping by, not to laugh but to stare. "She's working him like a hired hand," someone muttered at the general store. "She doesn't act grateful," another said. Ethan heard it all. The words cut deeper than before because part of him agreed. He was the husband in name only. The joke hadn't ended. It had evolved. One evening, frustration boiled over. "Why are you here?" he demanded, standing outside the locked door. "Really here?" Silence stretched long enough to make him regret asking. Finally, her voice came through the wood. "Because once, I trusted people who judged me by my body, and they took everything else." He swallowed. "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything," she said, "and nothing." That night, Ethan dreamed of doors that wouldn't open and fields that bloomed only when he stopped watching them. The first real disaster came with the storm. Rain fell hard and sudden, turning dry ground into mud. The old shed collapsed under the weight, crushing supplies Ethan couldn't afford to lose. He stood in the downpour, chest tight, watching months of effort sink into the earth. Margaret appeared beside him, rain soaking her dress, hair coming loose for the first time. "We can rebuild," she said. "With what?" he snapped. "Hope?" "With work," she replied calmly, "and patience, and a plan." Something in her certainty steadied him. They salvaged what they could, hands numb, clothes heavy. That night, she didn't lock the door right away. Instead, she spoke through it. Tomorrow, we go to town together. Ethan's heart kicked. Together? Yes. It's time they see us properly. The next day, they walked side by side through streets that fell quiet at their passing. Eyes followed. Whispers started, and then stopped. Margaret held her head high. Ethan felt taller just walking beside her. At the bank, she spoke clearly, confidently, laying out figures, projections, plans Ethan had never known existed. The clerk listened. So did others. By the time they left, nothing was promised, but something had shifted. That night, the door remained locked. But for the first time, Ethan didn't feel shut out. He felt protected. And somewhere behind that door, a truth waited, patient, heavy, and ready to change everything when it was finally revealed. The night before everything changed, the wind finally rested. No dust, no howl through broken boards, just a deep, uneasy quiet that made the ranch feel like it was holding its breath. Ethan lay awake on his cot, staring at the ceiling, listening. Not for footsteps this time, but for meaning. Weeks had passed since the wedding, and somehow the locked door no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like a promise waiting for the right moment to be kept. At dawn, Margaret knocked, not called, not spoke through the wood. She knocked. Ethan sat up so fast the blanket slid to the floor. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then he opened the door to the hallway. She stood there fully dressed, hair loose around her shoulders for the first time. She looked different, lighter, almost fragile, yet stronger than ever. In her hands was a small leather pouch. Today, she said, "You learn who you married." They rode into town together, farther than before, past places Ethan had never had reason or courage to visit. At the edge of the county stood a stone building with iron doors and quiet authority. Margaret dismounted first. Inside, people recognized her, not with pity, with respect. Names were spoken softly, heads nodded. Papers were brought out, records, deeds, signatures. Ethan's chest tightened as understanding crept in slowly, painfully. Margaret was not poor. She had never been. She was the sole surviving heir to a trading family that had been cheated, sabotaged, and erased by men who believed a woman like her, large, quiet, unmarried, would never fight back. They had taken her lands, her cattle, her name, and she had let them, until she learned how the world really worked. "I hid," she said later, as they stood outside beneath the open sky. "I listened. I learned who people truly were when they thought no one important was watching." Ethan struggled to speak. "Why me?" She met his eyes. "Because you were broken without being cruel. Because you were judged and still chose work over bitterness. Because when you could have demanded more, you accepted less." She opened the pouch and poured its contents into his hands, documents transferring ownership, not to her, to them, the ranch, the land, the future. "I didn't marry you for a cow," she said quietly. "I married you to build something honest, together." They returned home as the sun dipped low. The ranch looked different now, not because it had changed, but because Ethan had. He saw potential where he once saw loss. That night, Margaret stood before the bedroom door. She did not lock it. Instead, she removed the key and placed it on the table between them. "I don't need it anymore," she said. Ethan didn't rush. He didn't speak. He simply nodded, understanding that trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt slowly, or not at all. In the months that followed, the ranch bloomed. New cattle arrived. Fields turned green, the town's whispers died, replaced by quiet respect and sometimes shame. People who once laughed now asked for advice. Margaret never corrected them. Ethan never boasted, and the door that was once locked stayed open, not because it had to be, but because neither of them feared what waited on the other side anymore. This was not a story about a cow. It was a story about judgment, and how the quietest people often carry the strongest storms inside them.